The White Sox pulled off a coup getting Munetaka Murakami, and there are whispers they're about to do it again with another Japanese star player.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And on today's show, I'll get to your mailbag questions and comments, especially the disdain for Yoán Moncada potentially returning to the South Side, after I discuss the White Sox now being the last franchise to not even pay out a deal over $80 million, and how that hopefully changes soon. But first, let's discuss a rumor coming out of Japan that the White Sox are in the running for Tatsuya Imai and how this would be another major coup for the White Sox. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the White Sox could be exploiting the market yet again and end up with another Japanese star, this time a pitcher, because there are reports that the White Sox are getting into the Tatsuya Imai market. And the reason is, once again, the market has turned out to not be robust for Imai. And since the White Sox are perfectly fine taking short-term risks, they could be in the mix to sign him if he does go down the same route as Murakami. And that would be huge for the White Sox, as, first of all, they need another starting pitcher for this rotation next season. And it would once again show this team is willing to open up the Japanese talent market. And that could be vital to find plug-and-play players. I mean, you're not always going to get a Shohei Ohtani or a Yamamoto, but you can get guys that can come in and play pretty much right away. There is an adjustment period maybe, but on the pitching side, usually you can get guys that can be very effective pretty quick. And let's say Jerry Reinsdorf won't pay a second contract if he does sign and does succeed. Well, you can flip him at the trade deadline to get more long-term help. And also, it's following good process, because you're dealing with an owner who's usually not willing to open up his wallet. So you're at least going to tap into his business sense by saying, hey, if we sign these Japanese guys, even for short term, it can open up our business. We can open up the Japanese market for the business sense. And if they do succeed, well, we should pay them to keep the business going. And the other reason why this is good process, and this is what former host of this show and current host of the CHGO White Sox podcast, Sean Anderson, pointed out on X, formerly Twitter. And I have the tweet up for those watching on YouTube at Sean _W_Anderson. I love Getz showing interest in these players with faded markets. It didn't work out with Fairbanks, but it worked out with Mooney. I don't expect Imai, but if his long-term deals don't look right, the Sweetheart Sox might be the perfect short-term spot. And I love that, the Sweetheart Sox, because they kind of are like, hey, we'll pay you at least a decent AAV. We just want an exit ramp in case you fail. And the other thing is, just to be clear on this rumor, this could be Imai's representation, just trying to draw up interest from teams like the Cubs, the Yankees, and the Phillies, and the Mets to say, hey, you know what? If you're not willing to give us the years or the AAV, we'll just go to the White Sox, just like Murakami. Or again, if you're not willing, even if you're willing to give us less years, we want a high AAV. We want $17 million, for example. And we'll get it from the White Sox. But teams are apprehensive to give Imai a long-term deal. And again, Imai, there might be Amaye. I've heard it pronounced differently. I know I'm butchering it, but I even talked it over with Jeff Carr of Locked On Reds, and we workshopped it on today's water cooler that we had with all the hosts, and we've decided it's Imai. Okay? That's what we're going with. But the White Sox could be ideal for him because they are the bastion of runway. They could take the risk because they're not expected to win much. Yes, we would love to see them have a 10-15 win jump, but that's still 70 to 75 wins. So they can take the risk. They just want to have an off-ramp. And here's the report out of Japan. And this is how my Google translated it, because it is on Yahoo Japan. And it was all in Japanese characters, so you do have to translate it. And I've seen it be translated differently in other articles. So this is how my Google translated it. There's a Imai and Murakami tag negotiations between pitcher Tatsuya Imai, who aims to transfer to the majors through the posting system, and various U.S. clubs have entered the final stage. The deadline for negotiations is approaching at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on January 2nd next year, 7 a.m. Japan time on the 3rd. and the White Sox, which aims to rebuild the team, have suddenly emerged as a strong player, such as the Yankees and Phillies. Following the acquisition of infielder Munetaka Murakami, a major comeback from the big hole has become a reality. Ahead of the approaching negotiation deadline, the Imai battle has become chaotic. After the official application, the Yankees, Phillies, Mets, Cubs, and other strong players with abundant financial resources always aim for the postseason have been the access. Again, this is how Google's translating it. On the other hand, according to multiple sources, it was revealed by this day that the White Sox, which aims to revive the old Giants, are among the leading candidates. According to American baseball officials, the White Sox are showing an active attitude while the leading strong clubs are stepping on their second legs. This season, there are no players who have reached the required number of pitches, and the starting lineup is being reinforced as Imai is evaluated as an ace. There's also information that they're approaching with a contract of about 3 years rather than a long-term period of about 7 years. Japan's leading slugger Munetaka Murakami signed a contract of a total of $34 million, about 5.27 billion yen, over 2 years, and has put forward an active stance to enter the Japan market. As a dark horse, it seems to hold the key to the scramble. So there you go. Obviously, Google didn't really flesh it out too much, but basically, there's reports that they're willing to give a 3-year deal. MLB.com followed up and said Imai is in Los Angeles meeting with teams. So hopefully Chris got on a flight, and he is right in front of his representation. And yes, teams love him or hate him. That's one of the reasons why his market isn't going to a long-term deal. And in terms of what he is, this is what MLB.com's David Adler wrote. With Imai posted by the Saitama Cebu Lions on the heels of Yamamoto's heroic postseason performance for the Dodgers, that's one of the questions that jumps to mind, fairly or not, especially after Scott Boras, Imai's agent, said of the top international pitcher on the market, quote, certainly he's done everything Yamamoto's done in the MPB, end quote. Whichever team signs the 27-year-old right-hander will certainly hope Imai follows the Yamamoto career trajectory, but when it comes to his actual pitching, Imai doesn't do the same thing Yamamoto does, and he doesn't need to. Imai, who had a 1.92 ERA and 178 strikeouts and 163 and 2/3 innings for the Lions in 2025, and now wants to take down Yamamoto and the World Series champs in MLB, can be a different kind of nasty pitcher from his countrymen when he arrives in the big leagues next season. And in terms of his pitch profile, Adler compared him to Luis Castillo. He says Imai has 3 main weapons: his fastball, slider, and changeup. He throws those pitches from a low sidearm release point, which gives his fastball and changeup a lot of horizontal movement. Both averaged about 15 inches of arm side run in 2025, with the slider has more tight vertical break. That stuff makes Castillo, the Mariners' 3-time All-Star starter, a natural comparison. A low arm slot right-hander with mid to upper 90s fastball velocity, a fading mid-80s changeup, and a sharp 80s slider. And Adler also had him compared to Max Scherzer when it comes to like the competitiveness. His fastball is like Joe Ryan, and his off-speed stuff reminds him of Paul Skeens, and his slider can be like Trey Yasevich. Because in terms of his stuff, he's got 6 pitches. He's going to throw a 4-seamer about 48% of the time. Average was around 94.8%. And he's going to use it a lot against righties. He's got a slider that he's going to use as his next pitch. He's definitely going to run it against righties. He gets a 53% whiff rate against right-handed batters. He's going to throw a changeup 10% of the time. He's definitely going to get some whiff on right-handers. He's going to use it more against left-handed batters. He's got a splitter that he's going to use a little bit. He's got that Vulcan change that kind of Japanese pitchers have. And then he does have a curveball, but he's not going to throw it a ton. But, he's a guy that is definitely an interesting starter per Lance Brodzitsky of Marquee. He's got a huge write-up of what he's able to do on Marquee Network. And I think he's got it up on YouTube about how he can really he can sling it there. I mean, he can really throw the ball. He can spin it. He even says the potential is tantalizing, but there's also a high degree of risk associated with Imai. And he points out that he's had 4 consecutive seasons with an ERA under 250. And, he's got 178 strikeouts and 163 2/3 innings, but he also had a .89 whip in 2025. So if the White Sox can get him for a few years, it would be huge to see if he can upgrade the roster. And then maybe Justin Ishbia will pay him if he's effective. Well, speaking of paying, the Athletics have left the White Sox as the last team to never pay an $80 million contract. And let's discuss how that needs to change if these core players work out. And that is coming up next. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new: boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. So, before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sports partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. Access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On White Sox compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. You'll get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. And I'm in the chat talking baseball, and I would love to talk White Sox baseball with you, as I'm always up for chatting Southside baseball. So go to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Well, the White Sox no longer have a partner in cheapness. The Athletics officially announced signing Tyler Soderstrom to a 7-year, $86 million contract extension yesterday. The contract also has escalators and a club option in 2033 that could pay Soderstrom another $45 million. So what this means is actually unofficially, the White Sox are now the only organization to never hand out a $100 million deal. Even worse, and I say unofficially because, again, right now it's just only $86 million guaranteed, but, again, $45 million more that Soderstrom can earn, that's a $100 million contract. That's the going rate for premium talent. But even worse, they are now the only franchise to never pay out a contract over $80 million. Actually, over $75 million. That is just sad. And that has to change during this rebuild, because if Colson Montgomery isn't a flash in the pan and turns out to be this potential icon that we all hope he could be, or if Kyle Teal is the superstar catcher that he's showing flashes of, or if Shane Smith proves that he is a legitimate ace, because he's already a stud, but now he's got to get into ace status. Or if Braden Montgomery, whenever he's called up, is the megastar that we're hoping to be, that we're hoping he is. It's time to pay the going rate to keep this talent around long term. If Murakami is hitting home runs like he did in Japan at Guaranteed Rate Field, you can't let him leave the South Side either. And the A's are drawing revenue from playing in a minor league stadium right now. And they're also waiting for their new stadium to be built in Las Vegas. They're literally a team without a home. And they are outspending the large market White Sox when it comes to paying for premium talent. Because on top of Soderstrom, the A's have extended Brent Rooker for $60 million, Lawrence Butler for $65 million. They did that last offseason. And even though it is now a terrible contract, they did sign pitcher Luis Severino for $67 million last offseason. I mean, they were terrified of a union grievance, and they went out and spent their money. And if I'm the union, I'd be looking at the White Sox. And while I applaud the White Sox for getting Murakami at a team-friendly contract, if he is mashing, you need to pay him the going rate, because you don't want to lose that type of power in your lineup, the pipeline to Japan, and also the money that you can make in Japan. You can sell a lot of White Sox jerseys in Japan. So that might mean paying over $80 million. It could mean paying over $200 million. And if eventual owner Justin Ishbia is willing to pay most of the bill, then current owner Jerry Reinsdorf has to be willing to pay some of the costs at the beginning. Okay? And also, the Soderstrom deal might help the White Sox in terms of full costs. They might just have to beat that. They still might not have to pay over $100 million. Because Soderstrom had a .276 average with an .820 OPS and 25 home runs in 2025. He's still 23, so he does have a chance to get better. and he can play first and left field. And also then you can wave bye-bye to that dream of the White Sox trading for Soderstrom. I know I did a show on it last year in April. I know there was like kind of this thinking that, hey, maybe they'll trade him because they're set at first with Nick Kurtz. And they move him to left field, and he basically is almost like a gold glover out there, and they're not obviously getting rid of him. So the dream has died. But you got Murakami, so it's fine. And if he's motivated to be great out of love of the game and the motivation to be great rather than the money, this will be a great deal for the A's. Because I always maintain, find out what motivates young players. And if it's purely the money, like if this is just a job to them, because some guys just turn out to be, yeah, they're good at baseball. They picked it up, but they don't really like it. It is their job. And there's nothing wrong with that. During the first 6-7 years, you pay the ARB game, you play the ARB game then and let someone else make the mistake of paying them major money, just like the Angels did with Anthony Rendon. And now they're paying him $38 million to go away. But if they're motivated by true greatness and love of the game, pay them so you can keep them until their age 32 season. Because usually skills decline after that. Maybe if they're still showing some robustness, you bring it, you keep them until age 34. But definitely you want to try to keep them through their age 32. And you definitely want to have them through age 25 to 29. And the A's are getting that in the Soderstrom deal. They're going to have him through club control through him turning 31. And too many times we are seeing great talent leave because ownership won't pay the going rate to keep the few good to great players this team does develop beyond the club control years. I mean, we just lost Garrett Crochet last offseason, due in part to the money. Dylan Cease was just traded away in 2023 because, again, due in part to the money. And also, look at the White Sox spending on premium talent relative to the rest of the league. MLB Trade Rumors has the highest contracts for every team. And some of the main highlights that you're going to see, like on this first graphic that goes through Angels through the Nationals for those watching on YouTube. Christian Yelich, the Brewers signed him, 7 years, $188 million. Brian Reynolds got 7 years, $100 million from the Pirates. Bobby Witt Jr., 11 years, $288 million from the Royals. Carlos Correa, 6 years, $200 million. Jose Ramirez, 7 years, $129 million. Every team, small market to large market, willing to pay the going rate, even though it blew up in their face. The Rays paid Wander Franco 11 years, $182 million. It's just the risk of doing business. But you see the White Sox. Andrew Benintendi, 5 years, $75 million. I mean, think about it. If you look at the Phillies, Bryce Harper, 13 years, $330 million, signed in 2019 when he wanted to come to Chicago, whether it was the Cubs or the White Sox. And they didn't even make a move. And when they made a move for Manny Machado, they offered him the most money, but they didn't offer him the most guaranteed money. And that's what these guys are looking for. I mean, the owner laughed at the idea of signing Shohei Ohtani. And there was the report that they had to get the business folks to convince Jerry to authorize $34 million to sign Munetaka Murakami. And also, look at the players getting the most money. The White Sox have one of the worst among that group in Andrew Benintendi. I mean, even Jason Hayward for the Cubs did not age well. But at the time, he was a young player, and he at least did help them win a World Series. Corbin Burns, yeah, that didn't work out well either. He got injured, but there's still time for him to come back. Every pitcher comes back from Tommy John. The Marlins traded Giancarlo Stanton. And Steven Strasburg, yeah, it didn't work out, but he did, help them win a World Series before then, and there was no, it may not have been the best indication to pay him for past performance, but still, these are better players than Andrew Benintendi, and that makes us even sadder. So the hope is while Jerry still owns the team, Chris Getz can convince him that Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, Murakami, Smith, and many of the other talented youngsters that we hope come up that clear hurdles, pay them the going rate to keep them here beyond the club control clock. The only thing that could get in the way is potential hard salary cap, but I don't think that's happening in the next CBA. And a lot of you clearly do not want Yoán Moncada back on the South Side, and I want to share your comments on this week's mailbag segment coming up next. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. If you can't catch a show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. Man, you everydayers and fans do not want a reunion with Yoán Moncada. The reactions that I'm seeing from the poll that I put up on the YouTube community page at Locked On White Sox, and then the episode I did on Francis Romero's report that the White Sox were one of the 4 teams that had preliminary interest in signing Moncada this offseason. Oh boy, it's a hard no for a lot of you. And that's what I want to share on this week's mailbag segment. Because, man, a potential reunion is something that you everydayers, loyal White Sox fans are like, no, we don't want any of that. We don't want any of that smoke. So Robert Wallen, 8510, a loyal everydayer, this is what he puts in the YouTube community page. No on Moncada. If this happens, it ruins this wonderful offseason. And imagine if they do sign Imai. I mean, that would be like walking on cloud 9, even if it's short-term deals. You're getting 2 of the most premier free agents out of Japan. You're doing things as an organization that people never expect you to do. And then you go back and do the thing that everybody expects you to do, which is do something dumb. Go sign Moncada. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a second because that was a comment, but it's like, why are you still stuck in this past when it's time to be moving forward? Invest in players who can actually stay healthy. And even if you entertain, say, bringing back Mike Tauchman, who obviously his legs were starting to go, wasn't healthy. He did provide veteran leadership in the clubhouse. You don't get that out of Moncada. All right, Thomas Joseph, 3488. This is what he writes. I saw the online poll and thought, who in the world would want that? I mean, if you are still looking for some depth, if you're a team looking for some depth and not counting on him to actually be a starter, he could provide some value off the bench with his bat. And that's why I think he would be a perfect fit for the Blue Jays. I remember the Blue Jays being interested in him in last offseason, and I think they should be interested in him. Again, he could provide cover, off the bench. He could play a little bit of third base if he's, kind of a depth role. But if the White Sox are bringing him in to compete with Miguel Vargas, that would be organizational negligence. And for example, the Pirates, they might be interested because, again, they want to show that they're kind of spending money, but they're not. And again, this is a small market team that'd be like, hey, we're still getting a guy that has some talent. He did have a good 2019 season when he had an F4 over 5, and he had an F4 over 3 in 2021. See that? Even though it's like, no, we know he's never going to be available. But that's kind of what people would want. Lesselbro 8880. He wrote this in the YouTube community page, and I got it up for those watching. I don't really care what a player represents. Anthony Kay helped tank some other teams' chances to win in the past. Doesn't matter. If his previous failures had been with the Sox, bringing him back now would still be good process. First, because it's a position of need, but second, and more importantly, there's concrete evidence that he's improved significantly. The problem with considering bringing back Moncada is that neither of these things apply to him. To your last point, the Sox do not have a glaring need at third base, nor has Moncada shown any evidence that he's better or less injury prone than before. Bringing him back would just be plain stupid. And again, getting back to just doing something dumb. That would be just the dumbest thing the White Sox can do, but never put it beyond this front office to do something stupid. Never put it beyond the White Sox to make bad decisions. I mean, until they prove otherwise, they still have earned every ounce of scrutiny. I mean, it's why I tweeted about the Imai rumors of please don't give me hope. I'll be glad if I'm wrong. If they get him, I will be very happy like I was with Murakami. Okay? It would be amazing. But unless the only way it even looks somewhat okay and even then that's a stretch, is if it was a non-roster invite, but still, why do that? Go kick the tires on somebody else. Bring back Andre Lipsius. You don't need to be being stupid, because that's what it would be. Especially if you gave him a big league deal and a chance to compete with Vargas, it makes no sense. And the one thing I'm hoping that Chris Getz can do better than Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams is stop making moves that make no sense. And if it is an owner that likes him, maybe Jerry does like him, or somebody else, kind of like what was with Mike Clevenger. Eventually you got to say to your boss to try to convince him it's not smart business. But bad moves happen with every front office, just to be aware. But you just don't want it to be dumb bad moves. Sometimes just things don't work out. That's fine. But like thinking Mike Clevenger was a closer. No, I'm not dunking on him because of my personal feelings. It's just they thought he was a closer and he couldn't throw strikes. So, and I don't want to bring the Clevenger bros back out, but that's just facts. And bringing Moncada back, now obviously he doesn't have the terrible the terrible character issues, but there were huge concerns about his work ethic. So why entertain bringing that back up? All right, this one is from Gman-Pi40. You have to be kidding me. In his best days, that dude never came close to living up to the scouting reports, and the rest of the time he was on the IL hurt. I'll just turn it in a different way. I mean, he did have I think we forget with all the injuries that he did have a productive 2019 season. I mean, that was a tank year though. So it's kind of easy to forget, but he did have a F4 over 3 in 2021. So he kind of looked like he was getting, he was kind of on that trajectory to live up to being the top prospect in baseball when the White Sox got him, or the number 2 prospect. But thinking that he could get back, this is kind of the angle I would turn to, thinking that he could get back to that 2021 season when he's going to be 31, I don't think it's going to be happening. And he's given no indication that he can stay healthy. Like I said, he hasn't played in over 105 games since 2021. He's missed over 300 games the past 4 seasons. Why entertain that? All right, and then this is for Eric-B3Q3B. And he said this, let me add this about Vargas. He's a wonderful teammate compared to this Moncada guy. I love Vargas. Go Sox. And I'll admit, I have come to really respect Vargas, and I think he's earned the right to be the unquestioned third baseman next season. Unless the White Sox suddenly have this chance and interest in signing Alex Bregman, because obviously, you can upgrade over Vargas. I mean, he is upgradable. He's not a sacred cow. But unless you're in that market, Vargas should be your third baseman. And hopefully he's bulked up again in the offseason to provide some power. But, obviously they can upgrade over him. But it would be like, Okamoto, if they could get him. That would be great. Otherwise, go with Vargas. Don't entertain bringing back Moncada. I mean, Vargas can at least be a 1.5 to 2 F4 player who's available. And maybe if he has bulked up, he can hit 20 home runs or 20 to 25 home runs. And, you still would like some more power out of third base, although third base power has been way down lately. But you also, he's a very ideal bridge third baseman right now. And you want third base to have some flexibility in case you do need to eventually move Colson Montgomery there when Billy Carlson or Rock Chowalski, if he is the number 1 pick that the White Sox make in next July, eventually force Montgomery over to third base. But at the very least, you have a perfectly serviceable Miguel Vargas during this bridge period for a few years. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox, and I'll be back tomorrow with a Way Back Wednesday segment and to discuss, do the White Sox need to add anyone else other than Imai, because they might have some prospects that could be some solid reinforcements during the season. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. If you can't catch a show on YouTube, make sure to follow or subscribe. And wherever you get your audio podcasts, you get all the latest episodes as we're on platforms such as Apple or Spotify. You can follow the show on X, formerly Twitter, at Locked On Sox or at Todd J. Dub. Also follow the show on TikTok at Locked On White Sox. You can also email me your questions or comments to lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. And if you've never missed an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On White Sox ad-free plus a members-only Discord access and so much more. Head to lockedonwhitesox.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On MLB.